Here is the translation of the Vietnamese transcript into English, with full emotional impact, changed character names, and removed irrelevant parts. Hey everyone, I'm Jeff, and this is Late Night Horror Stories, where the most chilling tales are sent in from all over. It's an unusually cold night, isn't it? I'm sitting here in the studio, the lights dim, and in front of me is a letter. No, more accurately, an email sent just a few hours ago. The sender didn't leave a real name, only signed off as Myri. The subject line of the email made me pause and reflect. If your voice no longer echoes, cancel your trip immediately. I read that sentence over and over. You know, among the hundreds of emails I receive each week, there are stories of ghosts, of hauntings, of unexplained phenomena. But this story, it's different. Perhaps it's because of the way the narrator writes, not trying to scare, not exaggerating, simply recounting their truth. So, turn off the lights if you're brave enough. This is a letter from M. Bubble. Dear Jeff and listeners, I'm not sad about Grandpa passing away. Instead, I feel the need to share about him in the way I knew him best. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for him. That entity came for me when I was 8, and I certainly wouldn't have survived if anyone else had been at the wheel. That day, Grandpa and I went fishing. My dad was supposed to come along, but something urgent came up, so it was just the two of us, alone for the first time. I felt a bit awkward next to him because I'd never really been alone with him. I'd always just watched others talk to him, with nothing to say myself. I was only 8, after all. I was also filled with awe at how he and my dad were just like my dad and me, a voice full of authority. When he spoke of different types of fish and which bait to use, I listened as if it were the most important thing in the world. And it was a good thing I took his words so seriously. That absolute trust later saved my life. Everything started normally. As we walked through a small gorge, returning from our perfect fishing spot to the car, I heard Grandpa's voice echoing from the high cliffs. While he was putting things in the car, I had a few minutes to spare, so I ran back to that area and yelled. Strangely, my shout only echoed faintly once before falling silent. No matter how loud I yelled, I couldn't hear my own echo anymore. I was too young then to understand how impossible this was. I just thought I was shouting wrong, or that Grandpa had a special adult voice that echoed, and mine didn't. Still, it bothered me, and eventually I asked him about it on the way home. Every detail of that moment is etched in my memory. The clock in the car read 3:22 p.m. The sky was almost clear, with just a few streaks of white clouds, and Grandpa's eyes widened in horror as he turned to look at me. His knuckles were white, gripping the steering wheel. What did you just say? I asked how to get an echo like yours, I replied, suddenly afraid I'd done something wrong. I yelled, but I didn't hear it come back. His face, usually etched with small wrinkles running along comfortably sagging skin, was now taut and flat across his forehead and cheeks. His eyes darted quickly left, then right. He didn't find what he was looking for through the window, but his expression offered no reassurance. He leaned over, opened the glove compartment in front of me, and pulled out a bag of gummy candies. I smiled for a moment, but he didn't offer them to me as a treat, as I might have expected. Eat all of these. I held the bag of candy in my hand, which looked like a massive feast. If left to my own devices, I probably would have eaten them all, but not at once. Why? Eat them all, child, he barked, his voice abrupt, accepting no argument. I began stuffing gummies into my mouth. He looked down, then around, then at the backseat, and finally at the thermos in the cup holder between us. He pushed it into my hand along with the spilling bag of candy. Drink all of this. You don't let me drink coffee. Mom will cut you off. Your mother will understand. Drink it. I know it's bitter, but drink it all. His gaze was fixed on something behind me, and I turned my head to look out the window, seeing forested hills whiz by at different speeds depending on their distance. The furthest hills on the horizon seemed to barely move, but I thought I saw a tiny speck on the peak of one. He gripped my shoulder with one hand. Drink it, child. Drink and eat all the gummies. You need the caffeine. It will try to make you sleepy. Don't let it. To say I was scared then would be an understatement. I didn't think this was a joke. He was too serious and stern for that. The coffee was terribly bitter, but I gulped it down until it was empty. Then I started to swallow the gummies until they were gone. I looked to my right. The distant speck was still there, but now it was closer by a whole range of hills. It was still tiny, but now it had movement, like something waving back and forth. I looked at him, puzzled. He turned from the distant thing to look directly into my face. He inhaled through his nose, then faced forward, with a determination I had never seen. His foot pressed the accelerator, and the car began to speed up. We were already at the speed limit on an empty highway. The road, the caffeine, and the fear began to take their toll on me. I remember my cheeks and forehead heating up, my hands growing clammy. I asked, "What is it, Grandpa? I'm scared." "Be scared," he panted, his eyes fixed on the road as he continued to press the gas. I saw the needle pass 80 miles an hour. "This will help you stay awake. This damned thing, it came for your grandma, and it started just like this. Right before a long trip, we discovered her voice no longer echoed." His face contorted into a mask of anger. "But cars are much better now than they used to be. I won't let it take you." My back started to press hard against the seat as he floored the gas. I saw the needle pass 90, then looked out the window again. It was even closer. Now I could clearly see the silhouette of a man running up the hill, through the trees, over the rocks, parallel to us. "It's still there, Grandpa." He growled in anger and pushed his foot down harder. I clung to the armrest and door handle in terror as the car passed 100 miles an hour and began to shake. It felt like we were in a bullet, only partially controlled, far exceeding all safety limits. And I feared that the highway would suddenly no longer be empty, and we would crash into a car or truck ahead. But even through that fear and surging adrenaline, a cold drowsiness began to creep up my spine. My eyes started to feel heavy, and I dreamily looked to my right. The shock jolted me awake. It was on the gravel shoulder of the highway, perfectly clear as a shadowy human figure running at terrifying speed beside our car. In that moving darkness, I could see flickering points of light that made me feel like I was staring into night itself. The afternoon sun blazed in the sky above and behind it, but it had no effect. Staring at its blurry legs, which began to glide past the painted line at the edge of the road, I felt sleepy again. It was running parallel to us, but getting closer and closer. "Wake up," he yelled, recklessly letting go of the steering wheel with one hand at 100 miles an hour to shake my shoulder. "It's trying to drain the life out of you. Wake up." He swerved the car into the left lane, and still pressed against the seat by the acceleration, I looked down at the lane markers in the middle of the highway as if hypnotized. Little by little, the black legs began to land between each line, matching our speed. I remember the car shaking violently around me, like I imagined a spaceship taking off with astronauts inside. Now I knew we were past 120 miles and nearing the car's maximum limit. But at that moment, I was engrossed in watching the lane markers and the stars in its ethereal legs move quickly back and forth. It ran right next to the car and reached a hand down to open the door. Wind roared around me with the force of a 120-mile-an-hour gale, tearing at my clothes and hair. Half awake, I screamed, and he swerved the car as hard as he could to the left without going off the road. But it was no use. The running figure still held the door open, resisting the wind with its starlit arm, preparing to jump into the car with us. The other arm grabbed my neck, and the cold it brought was indescribable. The closest I can say is the immense speed and power of an antimatter universe that hated me. Somewhere, anti-value and anti-life were the rules, moving through nothingness at an absurd velocity, and this thing was a tiny piece of that immortal will. But it wasn't entirely here. It could only interact with us for certain periods of time. That's what I believe now. He screamed, the only fear I had ever heard from him, as the car seemed about to fall apart around us. I looked to my left at the speedometer, saw the needle far into the unreadable red zone, and felt the heavy blanket of sleep cover me as the figure reached out many times, but couldn't quite grasp me. The car door slammed shut, cutting off the wind. Inch by inch, we began to pull away. It ran furiously beside us, but the entity was just a fraction too slow. Between one moment and the next, it realized it couldn't catch us and it vanished. We had escaped it. I woke up in the hospital a few days later. Grandpa didn't tell anyone the real story, of course, but the doctors had plenty to discuss. Somehow, my body had been drained of crucial electrolytes, salts, and other things, and they assumed I was in a coma due to a severe nutritional imbalance. But I knew the truth, and I made sure to tell the people I cared about the little piece of advice Grandpa had taught me. I don't care if it makes sense to you. Listen. It's still out there in the empty expanses of the Midwest, and perhaps it always has been. It just was never an issue before we introduced high speed into our daily lives. People die every day from falling asleep at the wheel, and I'm certain not all those accidents are harmless. If your voice no longer echoes, cancel your trip immediately. It's waiting for you. Do you feel cold? I just realized something. This studio room is very soundproof. I usually hear my own voice echo whenever I speak loudly, but not tonight. Oh well, it must just be my imagination. Myri from Missouri, thank you for sending in this story. And to those listening, if you plan to travel far anytime soon, perhaps try yelling to see if you hear an echo, just in case. We're back. If you've just joined us, I'm Jeff. This next story makes me think about my own workplace. You know, we spend 8 hours a day with our colleagues, thinking we understand them. But what do we really know about who they are? This time it wasn't an email, but a call. The caller refused to give his name, only saying he worked at a tech company in the Midwest. His voice was shaky, as if he hadn't quite recovered from the fright. I recorded it and transcribed it for you to hear. He started with a question. Jeff, do you believe monsters can hide under human skin? This is his story. It wasn't officially mandatory, but we understood we'd be fired for unrelated, fabricated reasons if we didn't comply. Out of the 6 employees in my corner of the building, only I and one other openly opposed the company taking our genetic information. If the others disliked it, they never mentioned it. That's why figuring out who was actually the psychopath became so difficult. The information was supposedly confidential, but by Monday, I walked in to find a card being passed around for a neurological illness. It was sure to hit Debbie. She sat at her desk crying while the rest of us delicately ignored her and slipped a few dollars into the card. What were we supposed to say? She wasn't sick yet. That was probably also the first time I noticed a colleague acting strangely towards me. Clint was always a bit aloof, but he seemed anxious waiting for me to sign the card. Perhaps he didn't want to contribute. It's okay. What? I asked, thinking I misheard. I put in a $5 bill and handed it back. Oh, all right. He forced a laugh and moved to the next cubicle. By the time my ears processed what he'd said, he was too far to ask again. So I leaned out of my cubicle and watched him from a distance. He caught me looking and quickly concealed his panic. He snatched the card from Carla's hand and disappeared as fast as he could with a hurried walk through the office. I didn't understand what was happening, but it certainly made me feel odd. Over the next 2 hours, colleagues seemed to share a common hesitation when I approached them or asked for anything. It was completely different from the atmosphere we'd maintained before. We all dreamed of raises and promotions, and we'd promised to help each other, not fall into the backstabbing office politics that had already consumed most of the company. Those conversations had faded over the past difficult economic year, and now I found myself in an office filled with suspicion and distrust. Only Jackson seemed unbothered. He was in the break room when I went in to make coffee. Leaning against the counter, looking sadly into his cup because there was nothing better to do, he said, "Damn it, a fine for smoking now, huh?" As I made fresh coffee, I offered a bitter smile that he didn't see, being preoccupied with his coffee cup. "Company policy is voluntary and exists for our health benefits," I retorted. He scoffed, a short, skeptical laugh. "Or to expose our secrets. Did you hear they found out someone in this office is a psychopath?" My heart beat faster in my chest as the morning's strange interactions clarified. What do you mean? I didn't see it myself, but apparently the manager left the genetic test results on his desk, and someone found them. He finally stopped rummaging in his cup to look directly at me. Carla said the tests found a psychopath among us, a genuine, emotionless monster who wouldn't hesitate to kill us if we just looked at him the wrong way. "Crazy," I said, picking up the coffee pot to pour into my cup, asking nonchalantly, "Did she say who it was?" I wasn't really paying attention. My cup full, I walked out without another word. I had a slight idea who everyone thought the psychopath was, but it couldn't be true. I wasn't crazy or emotionless, and I certainly would never hurt or kill anyone. Could the test be flawed? Nora was the only other person who had openly opposed our genetic testing. I stopped at her cubicle. She turned around, and after a subtle jolt of surprise, she exhaled calmly and said, "Hey, how was your Monday?" Office etiquette made direct questioning difficult. "Pretty good." I took a sip of coffee and pretended to be fine too. Hear anything about the Friday test?" Her neck tensed almost imperceptibly, and her answer came about 2 seconds slower than normal. The pressure of the moment made me feel numb, but I kept a pleasant expression. "So," she finally leaned forward and whispered, "I don't believe it. This whole thing is nonsense." Leaning closer so no one else in the office could hear, I whispered back, "I know, right? I'm pretty sure the whole office thinks I'm the psychopath now. That's what the test results said." With that confirmation, I clenched my fists in anxious confusion, and I saw her tense up. Relaxing my grip, I told her, "It's not true, I don't understand any of this. Maybe someone swapped their sample with yours?" she suggested, her eyes wide to conceal their identity. Before I could fully grasp that idea, we both saw the manager approaching, and I quickly scurried back to my desk. Bob seemed not to notice my hurried dash down the aisle, and he approached with his typical exasperated demeanor. On my desk was a sticky note that read, "If you tell anyone, I will kill you." I quickly crumpled it and stuffed it into my pocket as my manager's tall, yet weary presence cast a shadow over me. I had a feeling he was going to fire me because of the test results. Even though I knew logically they'd have to wait a few weeks for the firing to seem unrelated, it still put immense pressure on me. In the shock of the note and Bob's proximity, I forced myself to politely ask, "Yes, what's up?" "Ah, yes," the manager said. "I have to inform you that some genetic test results were leaked this weekend. We're investigating, but company policy requires me to inform you that the information has fallen into unknown hands." I nodded, trying to suppress the intense emotions flooding my limbs. He did that. He left the information on his damn desk. Do they have any idea who did it? "That's company policy not to discuss the details of an open case," he sniffed once. "Anyway, that's all." He turned and started back down the aisle as I exhaled. How did he not notice my hand awkwardly stuffed in my pocket throughout the exchange? I was clearly hiding something, but he seemed completely unconcerned. I pulled out the note and unfolded it. Staring at the words, I repeated them to myself. "If you tell anyone, I will kill you." Is this real? Is it a sick joke? It couldn't be real. Nora and I had just speculated that someone had swapped their sample with mine somehow. I knew I wasn't a psychopath, but everyone else thinking so meant they'd be too terrified to play this kind of prank on me. So who left this note? The only person in this office who could have. The true madman disguised as a normal person. To say I was paralyzed was an understatement. My life was in direct danger, my life. But if I left my job, I would also lose my life, just in a different way. I couldn't afford to be unemployed, not even for a few weeks. But the note said, if I tell anyone, right, could I just stay silent? No, I'd be fired in a few weeks for being labeled a madman. If I didn't act, I'd lose my job. If I acted, this person would come for me. Worse, I had already told someone, through Nora's guess, that my sample had been swapped. I leaned back in my chair and silently observed the other cubicles. Carla, Nora, Debbie, Jackson, and Clint, which of my 5 colleagues wasn't who they seemed? My coffee quickly ran out as I nervously sipped and stared. I stood up and started walking slowly to the break room. Would the test confirm gender? I couldn't know exactly what the results said. I guessed Carla was the one who saw them because she was the manager's assistant and the office gossip. That also made her less likely to be the psychopath, as spreading the information would only jeopardize her position if it were her. I walked past her desk slowly enough to notice a hidden anxiety in her that lasted until she was sure I wasn't stopping to talk. Clint was diligently working on his spreadsheet, but I could tell he was watching me through the reflection in his glasses as I approached him from behind. If the results included gender, then he and Jackson were the only other possibilities. Would the psychopath, whoever it was, have the same questions? Clint's neck reddened with tension as I got closer, and I kept walking. His awkward social interactions and math-related skills made him seem like a good candidate for someone reserved and cold. But I realized a true psychopath would play the role better. Would it be someone more approachable? Debbie had just stopped crying. At the reception desk, I lied about expecting a call from a client, but she rubbed her eyes with a tissue and shook her head. No, sorry, no such call. All right, I lingered for a bit. What if her certain to happen illness was a cover? What if she had swapped results and oh God, what if I really was predisposed to that illness? I didn't want that to be true, so I kept going. The break room was empty this time, and a fresh pot of coffee had been brewed. Strange. I was the main coffee drinker in this office, and I always had to make it myself. Otherwise, it would be absurd. But it wasn't. I poured the coffee into the sink and jumped back as a pungent chemical smell wafted up like toxic fumes. The coffee had been poisoned. Someone had actually tried to kill me. After a few minutes of panic, I forced myself to calm down. I had to expose the psychopath, and I had to keep my job. Calling the police would definitely get me fired. Everyone would just see it as me trying to cover up being exposed by the genetic test. But who was here? Who made the coffee? I smashed the pot and threw it in the trash to prevent anyone else from being poisoned by the residue. Out among the cubicles again, I saw Jackson returning from the restroom. I took the opportunity to observe his desk. His cup was almost empty, with just a bit of brown liquid at the bottom. He ignored me as he passed, and I detected a very faint smell of cigarette smoke. After a few subtle sniffs, it seemed to come from a higher source. And I guessed that he had devised a system for fresh office clothes, but he'd forgotten about his hair. Nora waved me closer as I walked towards my desk. "Who do you think it is if not you? The psychopath?" I whispered back. She nodded. "We can't just let this go. We have to find out who it is, or we're all in danger." Her sudden concern struck me as odd, as the others in the office seemed passive about the whole thing. They had left a note threatening to kill me if I told anyone. But then they still left poison in the coffee pot. Her face creased with anxious horror. "Really? Are you okay?" Yes, her expression was perfect, so genuine I couldn't see any malice in her. One thing I don't understand, wouldn't it be suspicious if I was labeled a psychopath and then killed a few hours later? "No, if the police thought one of us did it to protect ourselves from you," she replied softly. "Damn it, good point. Wouldn't you do the same if you knew who the psychopath was?" "No," I told her, still studying her reaction. "Just because someone is a psychopath doesn't make them a threat or a murderer. All 6 of us have worked here for at least a year, and we've all been fine until now." She seemed surprised. "You wouldn't hold that against the person." I looked her straight in the eye as I said, "No." After a pause, I continued, "You're the only other one who opposed the genetic testing. That doesn't mean anything. The tests are just wrong, invasive, and wrong." A slow nod was my only response. Bob was walking past the cubicles again, so I returned to my desk. I hesitated before sitting down, and my eyes caught something in the seat crevice. Carefully pulling it out, I saw it was a syringe filled with an unknown liquid. Disgusted, I snuck out and threw it into Carla's trash bin, as she was the only one not at her desk, and I didn't want to be caught with it. No one saw me do it, but as I sat down, I saw Nora turn back to look at me down the length of the aisle. We stared at each other for an uncomfortably long beat, but then she turned back to her computer. When Carla returned to her desk, Bob suddenly appeared at my cubicle. "Hey, can I see you in my office for a moment?" Surprised, I just nodded and stood up to follow him. My 5 colleagues all watched me during the longest walk of my life. Clint looked subtly afraid of me. Carla looked eager for new news. Debbie was on the verge of crying again. Jackson's eyes were emotionless and skeptical. The corners of Nora's eyes and mouth curved just enough to convey a hint of anxiety for my fate. I entered the manager's office, and Bob closed the door behind me, separating me from the gaze of my colleagues. Some official-looking person was already sitting inside, and Bob introduced her simply as being from HR and invited me to sit down. Overwhelmed by anxiety, I barely heard him as I sat behind the desk and began to speak in his typical dull monotone. All I could think of were the different reactions of my colleagues and the emotions I had read in them during my time here. Which were real, which were fake. Which of us was ruthlessly pursuing their own goals without regard for right or wrong? "Don't fire me," I blurted out. "I know who the psychopath is." Bob blinked. We're not firing you." My racing thoughts stopped, and I abruptly returned fully to the moment. "What?" "We're promoting you," Bob explained. "We need your ruthlessness at the management level. It's a cutthroat industry, you know." He started to smile, but the woman from HR shook her head sadly. But what do you mean you know who the psychopath is? Are you saying there's a mix-up and it's not you?" Part of me wanted to laugh, but I held back, choosing my words carefully. "Oh, I didn't say anything at all. I'm happy to take the promotion." "Great, we'll discuss the details later this week. Until then, don't tell anyone about this change. We don't want to stir up office trouble and all that." "Of course." I stood up, shook Bob's hand, and walked out into the cubicle area. While the others looked at me warily, I headed for the break room. On the way, Nora caught my attention and whispered, "Did you expose the psychopath? Do you know who it is?" Not looking at her, I said softly, "It's all of us, Nora. Maybe not genetically, but it's all of us." I could feel her eyes still following me as I walked into the break room and started making coffee in a makeshift filter. One of the cabinets sprang open, and a small blade at the bottom shot towards me. It pierced through my palm and out the other side. Gritting my teeth, I pulled my hand from the blade, found an old company first aid kit, and bandaged the wound. And then I went back to making coffee. This was life now. While waiting for my temporary caffeine drip, I began to think about my own traps to lay and how I should fortify my cubicle and the break room for my defense. It was the natural outcome of being unable to leave. Stuck with countless other inmates, equally miserable and pitted against each other. It seemed we had failed in our dream of maintaining friendships. The company's cutthroat atmosphere had swallowed us whole. I turned around several times while waiting for the coffee to brew, anticipating an attack from behind. But no, this hell wouldn't be so obvious. I maintained a polite smile and nodded to my colleagues as I returned to my desk with a full cup, and no one commented on the bloody bandage around my hand. Instead, they began passing a card around. This story, it hits too close to home. Do you ever look around your office and wonder who's pretending, who's wearing a mask? And that last line, they started passing around a card. A card for whom? For the storyteller, who had just been stabbed with a knife, or for someone else who had just disappeared? I have to admit, after reading this story, I look at my colleagues a little differently. Perhaps that's the most terrifying thing, not the monsters in the dark, but the monsters sitting next to us every day. Smiling and asking about our weekends, we have a long night ahead. Stay tuned, because I have more stories to share. The next story is about something that becomes invisible, not figuratively, but literally. All right, I'm back. How should I introduce this next story? It's long, very long, and it's not the kind of horror you usually hear. No ghosts, no monsters, no murderers, just society, and sometimes that's the scariest thing of all. This email was sent from a temporary address with no name, just a single line. I survived, but Lucas and Simon didn't. I'm going to read it to you, but be warned, this story is heavy. If you're eating anything, you might want to stop. Dear Jeff, I'm a late sleeper, so I was still awake and playing games when the accident happened. Tires screeched before I heard the terrible crunch of metal. I thought it was just a simple car accident outside until a beam of emerald light sprayed from the street and through the neighborhood in front of me. And when I say through the neighborhood, I mean literally through the neighborhood. Behind my computer screen was my bedroom wall, and beyond that I saw, impossibly illuminated, my neighbors in their beds at the end of the block. It was only for an instant, as the beam of blue light swept towards me at high speed. But I saw the rooms and objects and people in every house, second by second. It was as if someone had X-rayed all the houses and plastered the images onto my bedroom wall. I just barely managed to turn to my left in horror, looking at the invisible, extra-dimensional source of light like a strobe light at a concert. It flashed brightly and painfully, peaking just as I looked directly at it. For a moment, I saw inside my own eyeballs. And somehow, the bones in my face, I saw the front of my own skull from the inside out. Then I vomited violently. My next memory is waking up the next morning with a dirty rag in my hand. I had cleaned up most of the vomit and then passed out, I guess. I finished cleaning up, then took a shower. While battling a terrible headache, I could still feel the green light in my eyes and in my head, but the experience felt dreamlike. How could I see inside other houses? My roommates had already gone to work, meaning they weren't sick. There was no way I could go to work, and I would be late even if I left immediately. At least this time, I wouldn't have to fake misery. With a strange cheerfulness in my voice, my boss answered, "Hello, I can't come to work today," I told her. "I feel terrible." She didn't respond. About 15 seconds later, she hung up. Strange, but I wasn't coherent enough to worry about it. Just then, I took some pain relievers and sat sipping water in the kitchen until something clicked in my head. Wandering out into the street under a cloudy sky, I tried to pinpoint the location of the light I had seen. It had swept out like a lighthouse beam. Although it had swept past at breakneck speed, I had a general sense of the direction it came from. Finding the right angle, I examined the road surface. Several tire marks showed something had happened here. At least 3 or 4 trucks had swerved or stopped suddenly. In the center of these marks was a small scorch mark, as if something had burned from above and slightly scorched the road. The gray sky began to drizzle lightly, and I could see the black starting to wash away. "You'll catch a chill, dear." I turned around. It was the old lady across the street, and she was waving at me from her porch. "Hello, Mrs. Harwell." "It's raining," she called back. "Thank you, Mrs. Harwell," I responded loudly. She only went back inside after seeing me reach my front door. She always meant well, even if her worries were a bit outdated. I waited behind the window until she went inside, then I went to my car. I desperately needed coffee, and we were all out at home. The drive-through line at the nearby Starbucks was overflowing, so I decided to go inside for the first time in years. I didn't remember customers being so pushy. Even in line, people kept bumping into me and trying to cut in front. They only stopped when I spoke loudly and insisted they respect the line. By the time it was my turn at the front, I was pretty annoyed. And then the barista asked the person behind me what they wanted. I turned back, disbelieving, but the jerk behind me just said, "Mocha Frappuccino," looking straight at the barista. I put my hand on the counter. "Are you kidding me?" He blinked. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. What can I get you?" "Didn't see me there?" I glared but said, "Venti black coffee." He started to type the order into the system, but then stopped as if he'd forgotten what he was doing. With more anger than intended, I repeated, "Venti black coffee." He jumped, "Yes, yes." I moved to the next area and waited. A minute passed, then two. The mocha frappuccino guy got his drink and left. Leaning over the counter, I asked, "Aren't you guys supposed to be aiming for a 3-minute time?" The girl making drinks at the espresso bar glanced my way for a moment, then went back to work. I stood there for another 10 minutes as customers came and went. Finally, I'd had enough. "Hey, I've been waiting for a venti black coffee for 15 minutes. The barista girl finally noticed me. "Oh, sorry." She moved to the coffee dispensers and grabbed a venti cup before stopping, confused. "What am I doing?" For the first time in my life, I yelled in a Starbucks, "Venti black coffee." That got their attention, but not the kind I liked. Stern looks suddenly focused on me, and the guy who took my order said, "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you don't calm down." "Sorry," I backed away, feigning retreat. "Sorry." The girl slid my coffee cup across the counter and went back to work. All the customers in line looked at me with disgust or fear as I grabbed my drink and rushed out. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a guy entering bumped hard into me, and my coffee fell to the ground and splashed everywhere. Seriously, but he didn't even stop. He got in line inside and stood looking up at the menu as if nothing had happened. Was everyone a jerk today? I drove around the drive-through lane and waited in line for 20 minutes only for the barista on the speaker to ignore me. I drove to the window, but they never opened it to talk to me. Extremely frustrated, I drove away and decided to go to the supermarket instead. But after grabbing a bag of ground coffee and queuing up, the cashier started ringing up the person behind me. In front of everyone, I demanded, "Hello?" Both the cashier and the customer continued their pleasantries while the items were scanned. The customer paid and bumped right into me as he passed. I stood staring as the cashier started ringing up the next woman. No longer angry, I realized something was happening, and there was no way this was a prank or a TV show. It involved too many people in too many different places, and not even my boss. When I called in sick, she hung up after a few seconds as if listening and hearing no one on the other end. I didn't know how or why or in what manner, but I couldn't deny it. I was invisible. I could see my hands and body and legs, and people could see me if they really looked. But they seemed to have great difficulty noticing my existence. With that strange hunch, I began to back away from the checkout counter, bag of coffee in hand. Paying seemed stupid when no one noticed me, and it wasn't that I hadn't tried to pay. The security guard near the door was alert and grabbed my arm. "Did you pay for that?" "Damn it, yes, I did." "I don't think so." He raised his radio from his belt to call someone else. "Wait," I said, half panicked. "This has never happened to me before. I have the receipt here. Look." I reached into my pocket and he released me. I tossed the bag of coffee up to distract him. He fumbled to catch it as I ran out into the gray afternoon drizzle. He didn't chase me. What the hell was this? So I wasn't invisible, at least not in the sense that I could get away with crimes. The thing was, the security guard wasn't nearby when I was at the checkout. I had the weirdest feeling that he would have stopped me even if I had paid. My headache returned, and I still hadn't had coffee. Defeated, I drove home and sat in the car in the rain, trying to figure out what to do. After about 15 minutes of fruitless searching on the internet, on my phone, to see if anyone was discussing this happening to anyone else, my roommates pulled up behind me. I got out of the car and caught up to them as they were halfway across the lawn. Lucas grabbed my shoulders with astonished relief. "You can see us," but my reaction wasn't the same. "Did it happen to you too?" Simon wiped the rain from his face. Everyone at work got stranger and stranger as the day went on. We couldn't do our jobs because customers ignored us. When we left, no one even noticed. It was a strange and terrifying thing to consider as we stood there under the gray, drizzling sky. But I felt a little better knowing I wasn't going through this alone. "Let's go inside." We retreated into the kitchen where we dried off, put a pizza in the oven, and tried to figure out the parameters of what was happening to us. Calls to friends and family were answered, but the people we contacted seemed unable to hear us. My heart tightened in my chest as I had to sit and listen to my mother ask, "Hello? Hello?" She seemed vaguely aware that my number had called her, and her voice became tense and fearful whenever I spoke. To some extent, I'm sure she knew what was happening. Although she couldn't consciously acknowledge that thought, no one else seemed to have that intuition. We were cut off. The oven signaled the pizza was ready, and I took it out and cut it into pieces. Mid-process, I froze. "Guys!" Lucas and Simon were arguing about the green light I had told them about, but both stopped immediately at the urgency in my voice and looked at me. "I couldn't buy coffee today," I said, still staring at the pizza cutter in my hand. "The first time was really difficult, and then I couldn't even buy from the supermarket. What if we can't buy food?" Simon laughed, half amused, half confused. "What do you mean, can't buy food?" "As in, if we literally can't buy food," I replied flatly, my gaze sweeping up to our cabinets. I started opening them and mentally inventorying our meager collection of random boxes. We had some rice, a few cans of tuna, a can of beans. The cashier literally didn't ring up my stuff. "We'll use the self-checkout machine," Lucas suggested. I shook my head. The security guard stopped me, thinking I'd stolen the coffee. I have a feeling we'd get the same reaction at any grocery store. Even if we pay, they might stop us and take the food back. A haunted expression flickered across Simon's face. "And even if we pay, we can't work anymore. We won't have any money." "Maybe it's temporary," Lucas countered. "Maybe it will wear off tomorrow or in a week or something." I opened the fridge and freezer. "What if it doesn't? We have 2 frozen pizzas in here and a few scattered leftovers. We could literally starve to death in our own home." "No, damn it, we'll ration it." Lucas stood up, grabbed a piece of paper, and formally wrote down what we had. Half a box of rice, 4 cans of tuna, a can of black beans, 2 frozen pizzas, and some meat and pasta we have to eat first. He put the list on the kitchen table and stared down at it. "That's 9,000 calories total, if we're generous." He pulled out his phone. "It says here a man in his 20s needs about 2,500 a day, but we can survive on 1,000, maybe a little less if we're disciplined. So, with the 3 of us." Simon interrupted him with a horrified whisper. "That's only 3 days of food." "Maybe we could steal," I suggested. "You know, just walk out with it from the store." Lucas knew the truth. If we get caught and go to jail, even just a basic local jail, we'll definitely die there. We'll be trapped in a cage and forgotten immediately. That was it. No other options. How could a modern human household only have a few days of food in it? How could we be facing starvation in such a wealthy country? That first day, we didn't believe the nightmare. We went out and visited 5 grocery stores in a row. No matter what we did, whether we paid or used self-checkout or even tried to ring up the items ourselves, security guards or employees, and sometimes even other customers, chased us until we returned the food. There was something insane and hostile about their attitude towards us, as if we were less than human somehow, and we returned with more than a few bruises for our efforts. Not knowing what the police would actually do with us, we were forced to abandon our attempts and return home hungry. "This will pass," Lucas insisted. "We'll sleep tonight, we'll wake up, it will all be over." That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep was absurd. We were in mortal danger, and every passing moment meant less than 90 seconds for us to find a way to survive. But that was it, we weren't in immediate danger. The mechanisms of society were still real for us, and we were still civilized boys. Stick together, that's what Lucas had said. If we stuck together, we'd be okay. I certainly didn't sleep. I spent all night researching local companies, but found nothing. A fleet of vehicles had transported something down our street, something that broke and sprayed us with an otherworldly emerald light. And that light had pushed us out of human social consciousness. Who or what could do such a thing? As dawn streamed into my eyes through the open window, illuminating my eyeballs with images from within, my persistent headache eased a bit. That morning, red-eyed and haggard, we shared a pizza. It tasted exquisite because that was all we were going to get for the rest of the day. During the night, Simon had compiled a list of hundreds of phone numbers of people and organizations that could help us, and he spent all day calling each one. Lucas spent all day driving to every grocery store, restaurant, and market in the entire area that might have food. I spent hours simply thinking of a solution, an escape, anything. I wanted to conserve calories by moving as little as possible, but I couldn't even do that. When Lucas ran out of gas, he found that the gas station attendant refused his cash, and the pump wouldn't read his credit card. As if he told me over the phone, the machine didn't even know he had put the card in the slot. The pump didn't even show an error, it just did nothing. Whatever had happened to us, it was getting worse. I picked him up, and then parked the car in the driveway. I had a quarter tank of gas left, and it was clear that meager amount would be all the gas we would ever have. That night, we didn't go to our separate rooms. We sat playing board games until exhaustion finally found us, one by one. I was the last one left as Simon and Lucas lay slumped over the game pieces. I wondered if I would eventually see them like that again, not from sleep, but from death. What would I do if it came to that? I woke up the next morning with that question still unanswered. A funny thing happens when you run out of things to do. When you have no work, when no one talks to you, when you've done everything you can, called everyone, tried every opportunity, turned every corner, you can't think about anything but survival, but there are no more thoughts about survival to think. So, you think nothing at all. We ate the last of our food and sat playing board games. And we did that the next day. And the day after that. It was our house, our chairs, our carpet, our beds, our walls, our refrigerator, our backyard. It just didn't have any food in it. You can't eat chairs or beds. And you know, hunger isn't so bad. What really slowly drives you insane is how persistent it is. You're not allowed to just sit there and play board games. Every second isn't your turn, and you just sit there. All you have is pain. A week later, Simon picked up the board and threw the game to the ground. There has to be some damn apple tree or something. Lucas didn't take his eyes off the game piece in his hand. It's late October now, nothing has fruit now. There's no food to be had, at least not within a quarter tank of gas. We're surrounded by food, it's just locked behind the walls of all these grocery stores. Simon's eyes were wild. We should just kill them and take it. Lucas scoffed. And then what? Get shot by the police? They have no problem noticing us when we act out. I was thinking about calling my mom again, just to hear her voice. But my calls only caused her repeated fear and confusion. Something inside me broke. Even if we found a way to survive, our bills would eventually come due, and the electricity and water would be cut off. New tenants might even move into our house and completely ignore us while we sat next to them, starving to death. Simon wasn't wrong, but forget the grocery store. Let's break into people's homes while they're at work. Much less chance of getting caught. We put on hats and tied scarves over our mouths to hide our faces. We didn't want to go too far because we'd have to carry what we stole, and we didn't want to go too close for fear of being caught. So, we chose the house at the end of the block. At 10:00 a.m., we slipped through the backyard and smashed the garage side door handle with a hammer. It was strange, being in someone else's house like that, with photos and decorations everywhere of a life we knew nothing about. Someone had left socks on the living room floor. Worst of all, I knew the layout of this place. I had seen it before. As we snuck into the kitchen of the house at the end of the block, I knew with certainty that the beam of green light had indeed illuminated this place. It wasn't a nightmare. I had actually seen the rooms and people a block away through a dozen walls. Lucas quietly opened the cabinet and looked at us in despair. It was empty. Simon went to the refrigerator and found nothing inside but a plastic container. I looked at the photos on the counter. How could a family of 4 children have no food in the house? Lucas froze. Unless it happened to them too. Simon understood him at the same time I did. They could literally be here right now. Scanning the kitchen and living room in fear, I wondered if I was looking right through my neighbors. We were certainly a threat. Could they see us? Were they standing in terror in a corner? If someone decided to jump forward and attack us, we would never see it coming. We ran, hiding, back into our own house. We frantically searched the news and the internet. That's right. There it was. Hundreds of homes across the area had reported their food stolen to the point that the police were on high alert and the city was promoting home security and defense. "My God," Lucas muttered. "That green light didn't just hit us. It's happening to the whole neighborhood, maybe more." Simon collapsed onto the sofa. "That means dozens of families were out looting and stealing before us. We'll never get away with it now." I was laughing. I don't know why, I couldn't stop. As if the world hated us. Or not even the world, really just society, other people. Every road was being closed, one by one. By us, by society, or by others trapped in the same situation. I was laughing at the absurd, mechanical perfection of it all. Civilization was spinning like clockwork to trap us and starve us. "If we stay here, we'll die," I laughed. No, not laughing, crying. "Let's drive. We'll go in any direction, and we'll drive until we're out of here." "We only have a quarter tank of gas," Lucas shot back. "And we can't raid houses without a place to hide to eat and sleep. Worse, if we get stuck even a few miles out there, we'll truly die. We no longer have the strength to walk for hours, let alone days. There's nowhere to go." My laughing crying had infected Simon. "How can there be nowhere to go? We're literally surrounded by houses. We're in a sea of homes and food. Everyone's fat as hell and dying early from it. And here we are starving to death among them." His smile widened beyond madness, and his laugh became agonizingly clear as it shook his frail body. "How can this be happening?" Lucas stood over him and shook him into the sofa. "Get a grip. We're already bad enough, and going crazy won't help." He stepped back and let both of us calm down. "It's time to make a decision while we're still sane." I no longer felt like laughing or crying, just emptiness. How to decide? Lucas looked us both in the eye, one by one. "We're not going to kill and eat people." At first, I thought he was joking, but then I realized it could actually happen. Our reality included that possibility, because we'll just be hunted down and caught and die anyway. He nodded. Simon just stared down at the floor, and we sat there in those positions as time slipped away from us. We still tried to play board games. Sometimes the hunger even left us. In the third week, true exhaustion began, and I noticed myself getting thinner. We joked about finally being on a diet, but we had little humor to spare, and we started spending more time in silence than not. By the fifth week, Lucas had a timer on his phone to remind us to drink water because he noticed we no longer felt thirsty. All our movements became painful, and we stopped playing games that required reaching across the table to place pieces. Eventually, we stopped playing games altogether and just lay there in silence. There was nothing to do but wait and hope something would change. There was no one to call, no access to food, and no way to get there even if there was. Darkness and light, night and day, became a swirling cycle of nothingness without thought or interruption. Our last real conversation went unprompted. Simon whispered hoarsely, "I'm glad I don't have to go through this alone. You guys are my best friends." He shivered under the blanket. "I love you guys." "I love you too, buddy," Lucas whispered back as best he could. They waited for me. It took me a minute to generate enough saliva to speak, but I told them, "It's been a great year." I couldn't see them from where I lay, but I could feel them smile. On the first night of the 7th week without food, I texted my mom just to get comfort from the red receipt. I knew she couldn't understand the words, and I knew it would only cause her confused bewilderment, but I just wanted to feel like I existed. That brief moment of awareness allowed me to lift my head and look over at Simon. He had wasted away while still alive, but now I could see a shriveling on his skin. My heart sank. "Lucas, I think Simon is dead." His only reaction was a sigh. No, I'm not going out like this. We're not going to die in here," I told him, using all the strength of my sickly limbs to force my body off the floor. I moved to help him, but I stopped after a single step. Lucas hadn't sighed. The air had simply escaped his bloated body. He had been dead for days. I had been lying in the room with 2 corpses, with a quarter tank of gas still in my car. I didn't know how far it would take me or where I might end up, but I had to try. The front door took me 10 minutes to reach, and my car in the driveway looked like it was miles away. Worse, it was drizzling, and the cold cut through my body like 100 knives. I swayed with each step as my leg muscles begged to give out, but I refused. Inch by inch, I moved along the porch and up the curved path towards my car. "Oh, you'll catch a chill, dear." Hugging my arms around my body for warmth, I looked out in confusion. Mrs. Harwell was on her porch, waving at me. "It's raining." "What?" I called weakly. "Can you see me?" She waved back. "It's raining, dear. Shouldn't you come inside?" I was saved, unbelievably. How could she notice me? But a voice behind me replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Harwell, I'll go in." I looked back to see a guy my age entering my house. He put his backpack down and went into the kitchen. He lived there. He lived in my house, and he had never noticed us dying in his living room. She hadn't seen me at all. She had seen him. That wasn't my car in the driveway. It just looked like it. They had towed my car at some unknown point. It couldn't be seen anywhere. I collapsed onto the lawn. At that moment, I had not an ounce of will or hope left. There was nothing I could do. No resources, no friends, no family, no job, no home, nothing. All I could do was lie there and die. The sky revolved around me from gray clouds to clear night to green dawn until the morning sun shone brightly into my eyeballs from the side. Too weak to move, too weak to look away, I let it burn. And a strange thing happened. I began to feel better. Soft blues and bright oranges burned through the inverse images of the veins in my eyes, and I felt a jolt in the center of my head, right behind my nose. For a brief moment, I saw the bones in my skull again, but lost the bright green light, shifting backward somehow as if I were being pulled back to reality. The guy who lived there came out to get something from his car and found me lying half dead on the grass. He could see me. He could see me. A blurry, painful sequence of movements followed, but I was vaguely aware of being taken to the hospital. I spent another few weeks there, regaining my strength. Throughout that time, I watched the local crisis unfolding on the TV in my room. To them, it was an inexplicable crime wave, coupled with reports of corpses appearing out of nowhere, even in people's homes. Whatever force had pushed us out of social reality seemed to vanish a few weeks after death. At first, it was only adult bodies appearing in kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms, but then they started finding children. I knew that no one would believe me, but I had to tell it because no one else could. There are people among us who are starving and dying every day, cut off from survival by the machinery of civilization that always rides the edge of crime and despair. You can't see them, but they are there, and eventually, they will be found. We can do something about it while they are alive, or we can wait and hope that the next corpse to return doesn't appear next to us in bed or on the sofa as we're watching TV. But it will happen one way or another. You could be sitting next to an invisible, rotting corpse right now. Or perhaps it's someone still alive but slowly starving. The only difference is whether we can bring ourselves to notice the problem in time. This story isn't about monsters or ghosts. It's about how society can make people invisible. About how we can sit in our living rooms, watching TV, while someone dies right next to us and we don't even know they're there. The person who wrote this story, they survived because of the sunlight. The light reversed the effects of whatever spewed from that accident that night. But Lucas and Simon didn't make it, and how many others didn't make it? The email ended with a line I haven't read to you yet. The writer said, "Jeff, I'm sending you this story because I know you'll understand. Sometimes the most truly terrifying horror stories aren't about monsters in the dark, but about the people right in front of us whom we can't or won't see." I think we need a break after this story. It's heavy, it's painful, and it's too real. When we come back, I'll have other stories, perhaps a little lighter. Perhaps about things truly supernatural, where evil has a face and a name, where fear can be faced and defeated. But this story will stay with me, and I think it will stay with you too. Take care of each other, everyone. And if you see someone in need of help, don't look away. We're back. After that heavy story, I want to share another one. This story is different. It comes from a small town in Missouri, sent by someone who calls themselves a former resident of Briar Bell. The email begins as follows. Jeff, every town has its own urban legends, but in Briar Bell, our legend walked on 2 legs and was nearly 9 feet tall. I'm going to read this letter, written from the perspective of a child, now grown up and looking back. Dear Jeff and listeners, we all loved Mr. Will Scott. He didn't mind us using his land for sledding, and he always gave out the best Halloween candy in the neighborhood. So when we heard he'd been taken by the giant, Everyone was very sad. You won't have heard of the giant, so let me explain. The giant was a legend in my town for decades. Those who claimed to have seen him said he was over 9 feet tall, gaunt and pale, with an unnervingly polite smile. My dad said the giant was a collector. He liked objects. Dad said his favorite things to take were sad people, empty buildings, and dreams. I have to admit, he stole my dreams many times. When Mr. Will Scott didn't show up for church on Sunday, no one thought it was strange. Then when Monday came and he didn't go to work with my dad, people started whispering. My parents thought it was odd but weren't particularly worried. But then rumors started that the giant had taken him. A kid in my class even said he'd seen the giant in Mr. Will Scott's house through the window. I told my parents what Jake had seen, but they just laughed. Tyler and I rode our bikes past Mr. Will Scott's house every day after school to our friend Rory's house. We never stopped at Mr. Will Scott's house to try and see the giant through the window like Jake did. We never even slowed down. But one day we played too late at Rory's house, not wanting to bike home in the dark. We called our parents and asked to sleep over. Tyler was allowed. I wasn't. I tried my best not to look as I rode past Mr. Will Scott's cul-de-sac. I almost made it, but curiosity forced me to glance back at the house. The lights were all on, and my eyes were immediately drawn to the face in the window. I saw the giant looking back at me. I gasped, taking a panicked breath, and my feet slipped from the pedals. As I tried to speed up on my bike, I wobbled for just a second, my eyes never leaving the face in the window, before I pedaled home as fast as I could. The next morning at school, I told Rory and Tyler about the giant. They didn't believe me, of course. They hadn't believed Jake either. I knew I had to show them or they would think I was lying. We waited until evening, then rode our bikes to Mr. Will Scott's cul-de-sac. The giant was there, just as I'd said they would see, watching us from the window above the front door. It was such a tall front door that I thought the giant must be 10 feet tall to look out the window above it. He was almost smiling, but his expression showed a certain displeasure. Tyler fell off his bike. Damn it, run, we ran. As soon as we were out of the cul-de-sac, we all started talking over each other in panicked confusion. I can't believe we saw the giant. Did you see his face? We have to call the police. We returned the next morning with more friends, but the giant was gone. We returned the day after that, but again, couldn't see anyone behind the window. We started to wonder if the giant only appeared at night. A few nights later, as we sat in Richard's basement eating pizza, we decided to sneak out and see if our theory was correct. We quietly pushed our bikes down the driveway and out to the street. We raced to Mr. Will Scott's house, both hoping the giant was there and praying he wasn't. We saw him as soon as we rode into the cul-de-sac. He was still standing there, and this time the giant was actually frowning. "He's angry," Rory said. "He wants us to stay away." "I don't understand why he only comes out at night," Tyler said while taking a picture. "Don't," I shrieked. "Don't take a picture, you'll make him angrier. Maybe he sees us during the day too." Rory shrugged. "Maybe we can only see him at night because that's when the porch light is on and shines directly into the window." It was a chilling thought. We decided to test Rory's theory the following Saturday, encouraged by the assumption that the giant could only see us but never come out. As soon as the sun rose that Saturday morning, we rode our bikes to Mr. Will Scott's house. We had to get close, almost to the top of the driveway. But Tyler, he saw the giant still standing in the window. I made binoculars with my hands and squinted at the window for a few more minutes before Tyler suddenly said, "Let's go, jump on your bikes and ride." We caught up with him a few blocks later. "What the hell?" I said. The giant was there, but he looked different this time. "Different how?" Rory asked. "I don't know, he looked angry or just wrong somehow." It took us many days to convince Tyler to go back to the giant's house, and even then, he insisted on bringing his teenage brother, Mark, with him. Mark wasn't impressed by our story at all. He didn't believe us, but he still came for Tyler. As soon as we got close enough to see the giant in the window above the door, Mark got off his bike. He stared and squinted and stared some more. He got closer, closer than we had ever dared at night. We nervously followed him. Mark walked up the driveway, then down the stone path to the front porch. We didn't dare follow that far. Then Mark walked up the porch steps right to the door. "Damn it," he said, and then a few more expletives. And suddenly Mark was running down the front porch, down the path, down the driveway, and out to the street where we waited. "What is it?" Tyler asked him. "There's no giant," he said, panting. "Call the police right now." And he was right. It wasn't a giant. We stayed long enough to watch the police break down the door and cut Mr. Will Scott's rotting corpse from the chandelier in the foyer where he had hung himself. The body had decomposed, as if melting in the days we had seen it from the street. Mr. Will Scott left no suicide note and no goodbye, only the sad imprint of a middle-aged, divorced man suffering a hidden, sad depression. It took weeks for the town to lose interest in the tragic suicide. And months before the kids stopped asking us to describe the corpse in all its disgusting detail. Eventually, even Tyler and Rory stopped talking about it. Everyone had moved on, everyone but me. You see, there's one detail that always bothered me, one thing I never told Rory or Tyler. It was about the very first time I saw the giant, the time I was alone. The thing is, I saw Mr. Will Scott that night. He was sitting alone in his kitchen, eating dinner. But I also saw something else. In the upstairs bedroom window was an unbelievably tall, unbelievably pale man looking back at me, and he was smiling politely. Oh, there it is. The giant was real, but not in the way the children thought. Mr. Will Scott was dead, and his body, hanging, looked like a tall silhouette through the window when the lights hit it. But that last detail, the child saw Mr. Will Scott alive and also saw something else. Something in the house with him, something tall and pale and smiling. Perhaps the giant didn't take Mr. Will Scott. Perhaps he just stood there watching, waiting until Mr. Will Scott couldn't bear it anymore. They say the giant likes to take sad people, empty buildings, and dreams. Perhaps he didn't need to do anything at all. Perhaps his presence was enough. We have one more story tonight. A story about a sledding trip that went horribly wrong, about childhood guilt and silence, and about a child who never came home. But first, let me check the window, just to be sure there's no unusually tall person looking in. Nothing at the window, just the dark night and my own reflection. But sometimes your own reflection can be scary, can't it? This next story tonight, it's a difficult one. It's about childhood guilt, about decisions made in a split second that can change or end a life. This email was sent from Minnesota. The sender writes, "Jeff, I'm 35 years old now, but every night I still wake up at 3:00 a.m. That's the time my little brother died, and it's my fault. This is his story. My little brother, Theo, died on December 11, 1999, at our annual family Christmas party. He was 12 and I was 9. I wish I could say it wasn't my fault, but in the end, the whole thing was my idea. I'm from Woodbury, Minnesota, as is my entire extended family. Every other month, my parents would host a party with food and chatter. It was always a boring event, but I liked seeing all my cousins. The adults would usually shunt us kids down to the basement or attic. But that year, my older brother convinced them to let us go sledding at the park instead. We bundled up in our purple Vikings jackets and loaded up a sled with blankets and a bag full of hand warmers. Then I, my brother, and our cousins Mike and Jeff set off for the sledding hill about half a mile away. As soon as we were out of sight of the house, Theo stopped. "You guys want to do something fun?" he asked. "Of course." "Sure." "I want to go sledding," I muttered. "Yeah, sledding is for babies," Jeff said. His brother added. Theo grinned. "Good, because I want to take you guys somewhere way cooler." "Where are we going?" I asked, worried. "Mom and Dad will be mad if they look for us at the park and we're not there." "They won't look, they're too drunk," Theo laughed. "But I think we should go to the Horse Creek," he added ominously. Horse Creek was actually more of a small river than a creek, but it had been called that for as long as I could remember. The creek got its name from the neighborhood kids who found a nearly life-sized wooden horse, abandoned and half-submerged in the water. No one knew where it came from, nor did anyone know the river's real name, because no one was stupid enough to tell their parents they'd been there. "But Horse Creek is almost an hour's walk from here," I whined. "I'm already cold and I don't want to walk that far." Mike snorted. "Come on, don't be a baby. There are extra blankets if you're cold, plus hand warmers in your pockets." "Yeah," Jeff added, "and if you want, we can pull you in the sleds like the baby you are." Mike and Jeff laughed, but Theo didn't, and he punched Jeff in the arm. "Stop it, guys. I'm not a baby, and why do we have to go to the creek? It's probably frozen over already." "Because it'll look super cool," Theo said. "Yeah, I want to go," Mike said. We could tie our jacket strings to sticks and go ice fishing, right? I'm really good at ice fishing, I lied, so I have to go to help you guys. Sure, Jeff rolled his eyes. The walk wasn't an hour, it was more like 35 minutes, though it felt longer due to the cold. As we got closer, we saw the river had indeed frozen over. The ice looked several feet thick, though it was hard to tell. Jeff and Mike were excited and kept testing their weight on the thinner ice at the river's edge. I sat down on the sled and wrapped a few blankets around myself. I'm smaller than them, so I get colder, I rationalized. Theo, Mike, and Jeff stood at the riverbank and threw rocks onto the ice to see if they could break it. When they couldn't even make the slightest crack, Jeff declared it was time for a game of Double Dare. I hated Double Dare. As soon as Jeff suggested it, I felt a cold stone drop to the pit of my stomach. Double Dare was something we'd played since we were little. The rules stipulated that if you were dared to do something and you didn't, the game ended and you'd be a coward, and this ridicule would last for weeks or even months. If you did it, however, you got to dare someone else. Generally, the dares started mild, but with each round, the stakes got higher. The game only ended when someone was bound to chicken out. And of course, that person was usually me. But not this time, I thought, as I threw off my blankets and stood up, pushing my hat up from my eyes. I had to redeem myself and make Theo proud. I had to show them I wasn't a baby. Come here, Jeff yelled at me. You go first. Okay, what's the dare? I asked with feigned courage. Jeff said, all right, you have to take 3 steps out onto the ice. I looked at the frozen river warily. 3 actual steps, and not baby steps, real steps. Stop it, I'm not a baby, so prove it. I took the first step gently, paying close attention to the give of the slick surface below. Nothing I could feel, and the ice made no protesting sound under my feet. I took the last 2 steps quickly, then turned around and half slid back to the bank. My brother gave me a big smile and a high five. I dare Mike to take 4.5 steps. Mike dared Theo to take 6 steps. Theo dared Jeff to take 10 steps. And then Jeff dared me to walk to the opposite bank. The ice hadn't made a sound since we started the game. Instead, it was silent as death. Yet there was an unease that permeated the cold air and the silence. I stalled for as long as I could, trying to decide whether to complain. Jeff's dare was actually 2 dares, and I didn't think that was fair. Technically, I'd have to do it twice, once to the opposite bank and once to come back. I was terrified of falling into the frigid water that I knew rushed beneath the ice. Come on, don't be a baby, just do it, Mike said. Little baby scared of the cold ice, Jeff taunted. Stop it, guys, I'm not a baby. This dare isn't fair, it's 2 dares. My voice was drowned out by Jeff and Mike's fake crying. I looked at Theo for help, but he was grinning. My own brother wasn't even trying to defend me. He was laughing with them. I felt my bottom lip tremble and tears welled up. Don't cry. Babies cry, I'm not a baby. I whipped my head back to the river so they couldn't see my red face and traitorous tears. I felt the sobs start to bubble up through my throat, and I knew I couldn't let them hear it. I would die before I let them see me cry. I took a deep breath and ran across the ice as fast as I could. And for a moment, I actually hoped I would fall through. They'd be in so much trouble, and they'd feel so sorry for teasing me and calling me a baby. With each thump of my boots, I listened for the ice to crack, but there was nothing. And before I knew it, I was on the other side. I threw my fist into the air in triumph and waited to hear them cheer. When I turned to look, they were still standing in a circle together, laughing. They hadn't even watched me. They missed the whole dare, and I wanted to cry again. I swallowed my tears and was about to scream that I wanted to go home. But just then, I noticed something dangling from the tree above them. How could I have forgot? I was the only one who noticed it, and I realized it was my ticket to revenge and redemption. But who to dare? I stood silently watching them as they joked with each other, pointing at each one in turn, silently mouthing to myself, 1 cat, 2 cat, 3 cat jump, 4 cat, 5 cat, 6 cat jump, 7 cat, 8 cat. Bang, my finger stopped on Theo. Good, asterisk, I thought, he's supposed to be my brother, he deserves it most. I cleared my throat. I dare, I yelled across the small river, interrupting them. They turned to look at me, almost surprised to see me standing on the other bank, so they had forgotten about me. I dare, I started again with renewed anger. Theo, swing across the creek and land on this side. Silence fell as all 3 looked up at the rope hanging from the tree above them. In the summer, we would take turns swinging from it and jumping into the water. And if you pushed off the tree hard enough, you could actually make it to the other side of the creek. I had seen my brother do it many times. Theo's eyes widened, and he looked at me as if I had just pronounced his death sentence. Jeff and Mike immediately started urging him on, telling him not to chicken out. I grinned triumphantly from the other side of the river. I hoped he would fail the dare. That would be what he deserved. It didn't take much more taunting for Theo to climb the tree and grab the rope. He tested it a few times, then hung from it with his full weight. It held, as it always had. "When I get over there, I'm going to dare you to jump rope in the middle of the creek," he yelled at me. That's when I realized my mistake. If Theo dared me to do that, I would certainly chicken out, and then they'd tease me until Easter. I sent a silent prayer to God that Theo wouldn't make it to this side of the river. "Count to 3, Mike yelled at Theo. I watched Theo silently count to himself, then push off the tree as hard as he could. He swung in a long, deep arc just like he always did. I watched the spectacle with my fingers crossed, hoping the rope wouldn't be long enough and he'd have to land back on the other bank. The dare wouldn't be completed and the game would end, but I could tell immediately that he would make it, and I sadly stepped back to make room for him to land. And then suddenly, the loudest sound I'd ever heard before or since rang through the air like a gunshot. Crack! Theo broke through just as he touched the ice, and the rope and branch followed him down into the darkness below. I felt my legs move under me as I slid and scrambled out to the gaping, jagged hole, absolute panic crushing my chest like a vice. All 3 of us lay face down, frantically searching the angry gap of water. For 10 seconds, we searched the angry gap of water. But all we could feel were the branches below us, and within 1 minute we couldn't feel anything at all. Our hands and arms had gone numb. Jeff pulled Mike and I up, and we started running towards the sled. "Leave his sled here, we need to get out of here right now." I felt cold and dead. I stumbled blindly towards the sound of my cousins' voices. "We need to save Theo. I want Theo. He's in the ice. We have to call Mom and Dad." But I stammered so badly that I doubted they understood a single word. And despite my confused protests, I followed them through the woods, bewildered and cold. But after a while, I no longer felt cold. I couldn't feel any pain in my heart, or, in fact, I couldn't feel anything at all. Mike didn't say a word the entire way home, but Jeff kept talking about the plan. "We'll just say Theo decided to go home before us, and he said he was going to take a shortcut through the woods, the other asterisk woods on the far side of the road." I just nodded for a while, even smiling at his plan. God, to this day, I don't know why I smiled. We were almost home when I started processing what he was saying. "No, I have to tell Dad to save Theo." I told him, surprised at the flat tone of my voice. Mike just kept walking forward in a daze, but Jeff turned back to me. "It's too late to save him, but you can save yourself. It's your fault because it was your dare. They'll put you in jail for murder and put you on death row. It's an open and shut case. You can't tell anyone anything, ever." And I don't know why I believed him, but I did. The hardest part of the day wasn't watching my brother die, or the long, cold walk home. The hardest part by far was pretending nothing was wrong when we got home. "What do you mean you haven't seen him? He should be home by now. He started home an hour before us." I couldn't keep a straight face for long, and I started to cry. My dad thought it was because I was so cold that my skin had started to turn white. The adults immediately organized a search of the woods between our house and the park. Of course, nothing was found. By evening, they had called the police search and rescue, who searched the wrong woods for the next 24 hours because they believed our story. The sledding hill was crowded that day, but a few people swore they saw us there. The next day, they planned to search the other side of the woods, where Theo actually was. But a blizzard hit overnight, and the search was canceled. My parents were told that wherever Theo was, he was certainly dead. Parents in the neighborhood stopped letting their children play in the woods, even in the summer. My parents didn't let me leave the house for a year. I grew up angry and resentful. I hated everyone, but no one more than myself. I applied to college just to get away from my parents. Their constant love and support made me feel disgusted and wrong. I wish they had another child so they could shower their love on someone deserving and stop talking about Theo all the time. I went to UFM, my grades were terrible, and I drank a lot. My parents pressured me to excel because I was the last horse in the race. I never answered their calls or emails. I lived with my guilt just barely, but I lived with it. If nothing else, I could take a small amount of pride in the fact that I was surviving. Drunk one night, I finally told a few close friends about it. They agreed that it wasn't my fault, that things happen, and Theo wouldn't want me to suffer over it forever. I gave the dare, but he climbed the rope. That night was a turning point for me. After getting validation from people who actually knew the truth, I cut back on drinking and improved my grades in my last 2 semesters, and somehow, it was enough to graduate. A year later, I received an invitation to an engagement party at my parents' house. My cousin Jeff was marrying a girl he met in the Navy, and I was invited to celebrate their love. Although I always hated going home, I wanted to support Jeff. Somehow, just knowing he was living a full life, despite our shared burden, made me feel hopeful that I could too. The party was quieter and more reserved than the parties my parents used to throw when we were kids. They had become less joyous since Theo's death, more subtle, more somber. Jeff was quieter too than I remembered, but he was clearly happy with his new fiancée, who seemed like a very nice girl. And despite the wide smile that stretched across his face, his eyes held a certain wariness, especially when he looked at me. I only got the courage to talk to him once. We shared an awkward hug, and I congratulated him on his engagement and asked about his brother. Jeff told me that Mike was addicted to heroin and living somewhere in Arizona. I said it seemed Mike never really recovered. Jeff said, "I don't know what you're talking about," and walked away. I spent the rest of the party hugging relatives, making small talk, and pretending to drink, sobriety being suspicious in my family. After a while, I went outside for a cigarette and enjoyed a moment of peace. And in the secrecy of the autumn air, I started to cry. This party should be lively and loud. My parents should be vibrant and laughing. Mike should be running around the party, daring everyone to drink mysterious concoctions. I should be happily telling stories from college and talking about plans for graduate school. And Theo should be here instead of lying dead at the bottom of the river. I flicked my cigarette butt under a car and wiped the wetness from my cheeks. I knew what I had to do and where I had to go. I had to see the river that had haunted me since I was 9 years old. Had anyone returned to Horse Creek? Was Theo's sled still there? Had they replaced the rope? Had the creek dried up? This was my worst fear. It had a secret I didn't want revealed. I lit another cigarette as I walked and began listing all the reasons this was a terrible idea. I spent the trip either begging myself to find the strength to turn back or begging for the courage to continue. I arrived at Theo's grave before I was ready. The creek was loud, and the water rushed quickly. Recent rain in the area was no doubt the cause. The wooden horse itself was in terrible condition. Now only its head was visible above the water, and it was so rotted you could barely tell what it was anymore. No one had replaced the rope. I sat down next to the creek and observed it all. It was hard to believe this was the place that still made me wake up screaming. It seemed to have healed after taking Theo's life. If it could heal, maybe I could too. The tree was so full you wouldn't think it had ever lost a branch. The innocent creek bubbled past, full of life and vitality. Everything here was so different from what I remembered. Even the wooden horse, where a toy used to be playful, almost alive, was now just a diseased, disfigured head. Its eyes were pointed directly at me, and they held a lifeless stare that went right through me. It sent an involuntary shiver through my body, and I turned from the horse's head in disgust. I immediately saw what the horse had been looking at. A piece of red plastic protruding from the ground behind me. Theo's sled. My reaction was primal, and I had to lean over and vomit into the grass beside me. It was real. It had happened. Had I been pretending it wasn't real? Was that why I had really come here? To pretend the past was past and no longer mattered? How could I have forgotten what this place truly was? I stumbled to my feet and started walking along the riverbank, away from the buried sled, stopping every few feet to retch hoarsely. I just wanted to get away from it. That thing was all that was left of my brother. Everything that was once Theo now lay at the bottom of the river. I took a cigarette from my pocket with trembling hands. As I tried to light it, I tripped over something and fell forward. The cigarette rolled down the riverbank and into the water. It was a rope, and I knew instantly it was Theo's rope. I kicked it away from me. It was worse than the sled. If I had anything left to vomit, I knew I would have. The end of the rope lay rotting on the riverbank, its length disappearing into the murky water of the river. And perhaps I was sick or ill or insane, but suddenly I decided that I wanted to know. I wanted to see. I walked over to it and picked it up. It felt just like all those summers before, when I used to swing from it into the water, with Theo clapping from the bank. I began to pull the rope out of the river. The water was fast, and the rope was heavy. The creek didn't want to give up its secret so easily, and it resisted my efforts. Still, I pulled harder. Just as I felt I was nearing the end of it, something long and thin surfaced from the river. I only saw it for a moment before the rotten rope snapped, and it sank back into the dark depths. I almost plunged in after it, but as I stood on the riverbank, my brain screamed at me. I realized what I had almost done. What if it was Theo? Did I want to see? Breaking free from the trance, I threw the rest of the rope into the water and ran into the woods. In a hurry, I struggled to breathe, and the trees began to spin around me. I nervously lit another cigarette and let the shivers run through my body. As I waited for the nicotine to calm me, I stood there in the woods, the broken rope 20 feet behind me at the bottom of the river, and took short breaths from my cigarette. And as my breathing became bearable again, I felt someone watching me. It was Theo. Of course. He was sitting with his back against a tree. His faded purple Vikings jacket still bright in the midday sun, and in some places bleached almost white like his bones. The torn silver foil from an opened-hand warmer pack was clutched in his hand, still there after all these years. He stared at me accusingly. The deep hollows of his skull were somehow not empty. Instead, they held a knowing consciousness that he knew what we had done. He knew we had left him to die, but we didn't know that. Theo, we didn't know. We didn't know you crawled out of the river. We didn't know you were freezing to death while we ran home to bury our secret. We would have saved you, Theo. If we had known, you know that, we would have saved you. I screamed this at the skeleton, in my head or out loud, I'm not entirely sure. But Theo just sat there, looking at me. 30 yards from the wooden horse, 20 yards from the broken tree, and I knew he would sit here forever. Because Jeff and Mike don't need to know that our guilt is far more terrible than we ever thought. I know that's my burden alone. And I could tell, as he looked at me in the fading sunlight, that Theo agreed. Theo had crawled out of the river. He had survived the fall. But then he froze to death alone in the woods, waiting for someone to come save him. 30 yards from the creek, 20 yards from the tree. And now the storyteller has to live with that truth. Not just that he caused his brother's death, but that his brother could have been saved. I think that's enough for tonight. 7 stories. 7 different nightmares, from super-fast entities hunting on the highway to people forgotten by society to secrets buried in the snow. Thank you for staying with me in this darkness. Thank you for listening to stories that need to be told, no matter how painful they are. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. Sometimes they are the choices we make, the secrets we keep, and the silence we carry. Hey everyone, Jeff here again. Tonight is another long night, filled with chilling stories sent in by my listeners. I'm sitting here in this dark studio, with only the light from my computer screen, and I have to confess, sometimes I wonder if I really want to read these things. Today I received a particularly unsettling email. The sender didn't leave a real name, only signed off as ML, and this story, folks, it made me read it over and over again to believe it was true. It's about an abandoned amusement park, about childhood friendships, and about a dark secret buried underground. All right, I'm going to read this letter verbatim for you. Turn off the lights if you're brave enough. To Jeff and the show's listeners, I'm writing this with hands that still tremble. Even though it's been several years, perhaps it's time I told it, shared with someone the nightmare that my friends and I experienced at Adventure Valley, or as we called it, the Park of Childhood. 2 more miles to exit 19 to Valley Park Drive South. Siri's voice announced from my sister Chloe's phone. Charlotte, turn that off, I know the way. Are you sure? I mean, it's been decades, Mark. How could I forget the way to Adventure Valley? Remember, every summer we'd. There it is. Chloe suddenly swung her arm, pointing through the window. Adventure Valley? Oh my God, what was that roller coaster called? Steel something, right? Wait, no, that's Mayhem Mountain, right? I gently pushed my sister's arm back towards her seat. I couldn't blame Chloe, as I was trying to suppress my own excitement. It felt like we were kids again, screaming and bouncing in the back of our parents' car as the gleaming wooden tracks of the roller coaster appeared above the treetops. That's Steel Viper, I said. Mayhem Mountain is on the other side of the park, and that wooden coaster is Excalibur, right? That's it, I remember now. I was always too scared to ride Viper, but I'd go on Excalibur over and over. You're an adult now, Chloe. I think it's time you tried Viper. As long as the contractors have inspected it and given the okay, then you're riding. That was the problem. We didn't know which rides had been safety checked and which hadn't. I'd left a few voicemails for Brandon asking about it. He was in charge of everything, but things had moved so fast since we bought the park. I didn't blame Brandon for being busy. If someone had told me at age 12 that my crazy, hyperactive friend Brandon Decker would graduate with honors from Northwestern Business School, I would have laughed in their face. Brandon? No way. Tyler, maybe, but not Brandon. In fact, I think half the reason Brandon chose business was because of Adventure Valley. When the park closed in '99, Brandon gathered us in his basement. And with a solemnity I'd never seen, he made us swear. At the time, that oath was the most serious thing 5 12-year-olds could do. Buzzed from a summer of fun at Adventure Valley, we agreed as solemnly as a parliamentary session that one day we would jointly buy back Adventure Valley Amusement Park. Of course, back then the plan was just to buy it back and ride the coasters to our heart's content. We had decided which friends from school would be allowed in and which enemies would be banned. It was our park, after all, and our ownership of it was a foregone conclusion. It took 20 years, but we finally fulfilled our promise. Thanks to Brandon's relentless urging and a massive mortgage from Tyler, the bank agreed to loan us several $1,000,000 to buy, repair, renovate, and reopen the park. The amount of money the 6 of us were on the hook for gave me nightmares for weeks. How could this place be profitable? It had been closed for decades after continuous losses. The area had seen many disappearances and runaway children in the late 1980s. The entire region was tense as cases piled up, and people became sullen and suspicious of each other. That had killed park attendance. But seeing the first crests of the roller coaster tracks through the trees made me forget all my financial worries. This was Adventure Valley. If we opened it, customers would come. "There it is, there's our exit," Chloe exclaimed. I turned off the highway and made a left under the overpass. Less than a mile later, the park's massive parking lot appeared on the right. We turned in and drove straight to the front near the gates, where a few cars were already parked. A Lexus, a Mini Cooper, an old Chevelle, and a Honda Civic, also a rental like ours. "Looks like we're the last ones," Chloe said. She was right. As I parked next to the Lexus, I saw a group of people standing by the ticket booth, waving us over. "Oh my God, Tyler, wow, he's so skinny. And Brandon's bald now. Oh, and Kyan is so handsome." "Calm down, Paris Hilton," I said. "These are my friends. Hands off, same rules as when we were kids. Besides, half of them are married." "Really? Which half?" I raised an eyebrow at Chloe and shook my head. My sister never got over her boy craziness. "Who's that other person?" Chloe asked as we got out of the car. "What? That's Scott, you know Scott." "Not Scott. Scott looks exactly the same, the girl next to Scott." Oh, I'd procrastinated so long I'd forgotten to tell my sister. "That's Jenny, Scott's girlfriend." "Jenny, as in Daniel Bircher." "Yeah, that's right." My sister looked at me with a horrified expression as if I'd betrayed her, but it was fleeting, replaced by a sly smile. "All right, I guess she's not like high school anymore. Everyone's an adult now, right? Come on, let's go." I sighed with relief as I closed the car door and followed Chloe to the entrance. Even though I saw these people every year, seeing them all standing together at the Adventure Valley ticket booth brought me a joy I hadn't felt in a long time. Damn it, Mark Lantes, I can't believe it. Tyler had a sharp, commanding voice that probably made his employees tremble. But I knew him like a brother, so Tyler's swagger just made me laugh. "Can you believe it?" I asked, hugging and patting his back. Standing at the main gate again, $15 a day doesn't sound so unreasonable now, does it? "Don't even think about $15, Brandon said as he shook my hand. "By my calculations, we'll be charging about $65 a day." "I'll pay," Chloe laughed as she hugged Kyan. "Will people really pay $65 a day?" Kyan asked. "Even Disneyland only charges $85 for 2 parks." "Almost forgot," Brandon shook his head. "One of our investors works for Mickey Mouse. Too bad they didn't let him design this place for us." "Come on, I'm not an artist, I'm an engineer." "You mean a imaginary engineer, right?" Chloe winked. Kyan sighed and shook his head. "Yeah, that's right." While Brandon and Chloe teased Kyan, I walked towards the ticket booth where Scott and his girlfriend were talking. I didn't understand why Scott was standing apart, but thought it might be related to the investment. "Scott, the poorest of the six of us, worked at his dad's garage and didn't have much money to invest. I thought he was embarrassed about the money, but looking at him now, leaning against the counter with half-closed eyes, I realized it wasn't that. Scott was high. Still the same old Scott. "What's up, you stoner? My friend, it's been 15 years, give me a hug." Scott laughed and pushed off the wall to hug me. "Hey, how are you? Look at you, what kind of diet are you on? Grass and lettuce. How are you going to get girls looking so skinny? Didn't your mom complain?" "Hello, Mark, I'm Jenny." Scott's girlfriend smiled awkwardly and extended her hand. "Do you remember me? Jenny Bircher." "Yeah, I remember," I said. "You were in my sister's class, right? Chloe Lantes." Jenny looked a bit embarrassed. "Yes, but we weren't really friends, to put it lightly. I think we were freshmen when you guys were seniors," she added. "Yeah, I remember," I said. "Maybe we should get this out of the way now." I called Chloe over, and the reintroduction of the two girls, though a bit awkward, was quickly over. Everyone was eager to get into the park. It was strange not having to stop to buy tickets, and even stranger to walk past the turnstiles. I happily reminded myself that we own this place now. Brandon led us on a tour of the park. Not a geographical tour, which we knew by heart, but a layout and reorganization of the park as he envisioned it. Excalibur will need the most repairs, according to Rick. A wooden coaster exposed to the elements for so many years will keep as much of the original structure as possible, but we might have to rebuild most of it. "Do we have enough money?" Scott asked loudly from the back where he was walking with Danny. "Yes," Tyler said, "we have enough." "Ah, the rich owner of the mini dealership treats you well, huh?" I elbowed him hard. Tyler stumbled but kept his balance to push me towards the churro stand. 6 BMW dealerships treat me very well, well enough for the huge collateral we needed," Brandon added. Then Chloe ran up behind us and put her arms around Tyler and Kyan. "Can we ride now?" "Are you kidding? What did we come here for?" Tyler laughed. "I only came to ride Mayhem Mountain," I said, rubbing my hands together. Brandon raised his hands. All right, I thought you guys were interested in the investment." Kyan snorted. "We're only interested in the projected ROI. And more importantly, which rides have passed safety inspections." "Oh," Brandon stopped, trying to look annoyed but failing. He was smiling more than half-heartedly. "You can ride." Suddenly everyone spoke at once. "Is Steel Viper ready?" "Yeah, that's okay." "What about Snapdragon?" "That's good too." "Renegade Falls?" "No water yet." "High Roller?" "Good." "Space Spin?" "Ugh." "Power Tower is being inspected this week." There was only one ride I cared about, mine and Brandon's. "What about Mayhem Mountain?" "That's good to go too," he replied amid groans from everyone else. Mayhem Mountain had always been our special ride. While the others happily rode High Roller and Snapdragon over and over until they were exhausted, Brandon and I would always break off at the end of the day to ride Mayhem Mountain until sunset. Chloe shivered. "I hate that ride, it's so boring." Kyan agreed. "I helped design a similar ride for Hong Kong Disneyland. They put it in Fantasyland, of all places." "Hey, that ride is awesome. It's long and it has loops," I argued. "Chloe's still scared to ride it." "I'm not scared, it just gives me the creeps. There's something, I don't know, it feels weird." "All right, we'll start from this end of the park and work our way back. That way we can ride every ride that's been inspected, including Mayhem Mountain," Brandon said. "And Snapdragon," Tyler added, and everyone nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, every ride. And of course, we can ride it, as many times as we want." "Awesome," Kyan high-fived Brandon, and we headed towards Space Spin. It only took an hour or two for me to forget I was 35. Back here, running through the pathways with my friends, arguing about who got to sit in the front row of the first car, it was like we were 12 again. But my eyes kept drifting to the far end of the park, where the gleaming tracks of Mayhem Mountain shone in the sun. There would be no arguing about who sat in the front row of that ride. It would be me and Brandon. Always me and Brandon. Chloe, Tyler, and Kyan were like children, constantly running ahead and arguing about which ride to go on next, turning back to ask Brandon if this ride or that one had been inspected yet. Brandon and I walked a little slower, discussing ideas and improvements for the park. Scott and Danny walked at the very end, talking quietly and smoking weed. When we reached the Enterprise, a simple ride with cars that spun on a track, I volunteered to operate the switch while everyone else enjoyed themselves. The Enterprise always made me nauseous as a kid. Brandon stayed on the platform with me to chat. I flipped the switch, and as the cars spun out of the loading area, the Enterprise sign came into view. I sighed. All day I'd been trying to ignore the bright graffiti all over the park. But the words, "Fun Sun," on the Enterprise sign couldn't be ignored. Where did the missing kids go? And other similar graffiti in the park. Where are they? Runaway Alley, find Ryan Kincaid. And the missing are now dead. Similar phrases could be seen in town, spray-painted on a few dilapidated buildings in the industrial area. Brandon's eyes avoided the sign, but I knew he was thinking about it too. Do you think that's why they closed this park? I mean, do you think it affected attendance? I asked as casually as I could. Brandon was silent for a moment, waiting for the ride to slow down so he could flip the switch again. No, I don't think so. Actually, low attendance wasn't the reason it closed. It wasn't. This surprised me. No, when negotiating to buy the park, I was shown the financial records from the 80s. So they weren't losing money. They were, but this park had been losing money since it opened in the 70s. Half the revenue was diverted into what was called district services, whatever that was. The bank wouldn't say, and I tried to find out about district services. I mused, strange. And according to the papers, the park closed because the owner didn't want to live here anymore, and he wasn't bothered to wait for a good price, so he sold it to the bank for a pittance. So he got rich. I leaned back against the railing, stretching my back, and stupid. Extremely, both park owners were Abel Vance, related to that French billionaire. Brandon nodded. Michael Vance. He built this park for his son in the 70s. Abel wasn't known for being business-minded. I always heard people describe him as simple. I can't believe a billionaire's son lived in this area. Not anymore, he left decades ago. I shook my head in disbelief. Who would have thought our little park belonged to the son of a famous billionaire? Who knows, maybe I sat next to him on a ride without knowing it. You guys want to ride again? Brandon yelled, asking as he brought the ride to a stop. I'm ready to go, Kyan replied. Does anyone else want to ride again? No, everyone said in unison. It was almost 5:00 p.m. when we finally reached Mayhem Mountain. As the sun began to set, a familiar feeling of panic and urgency welled up in my stomach. It took me a moment to realize we didn't have to leave when the park closed. Because the park wasn't closing, we could stay until morning if we wanted. As I eagerly approached the Mayhem Mountain turnstile, Tyler spoke from behind. Hey, can we go to town and grab some food before we ride Mayhem? You really want to ride Mayhem after eating? Kyan asked. Good point, Danny rolled her eyes. There's only one loop. No, don't forget the corkscrew, I said. Yeah, 2, Scott replied. Plus, it's a 2-minute ride. If the food doesn't settle, you'll have to wait a long time for it to end. Okay, I said. Let's ride a few times, then go eat. When we come back, we'll see how we feel. Everyone nodded, and we started walking up the loading ramp. As we reached the loading area, I was thrilled to see my favorite blue car parked on the track. Front row, Brandon and I yelled in unison when we saw the cars. Everyone behind us groaned. I'm staying here, Chloe said. I'll operate the launcher. Still scared after all these years, Chloe, Scott teased. Shut up, stoner, Scott laughed and ruffled her hair before running and jumping into the front car after Brandon and me. Danny sat next to him, then Tyler and Kyan got into the second car. We pulled down the shoulder restraints, and they locked into place. Ready? Chloe asked. Yes, Brandon yelled back. Launch. Chloe pulled the lever, and the brakes released. As the car rolled forward, I turned to Brandon. Did we intentionally get the blue car? I yelled as the coaster rattled around the platform and began to climb the first hill. Yeah, he replied. We've been testing the cars all morning, but I told Rick to keep the green machine in the loading area. Awesome. As the coaster climbed the hill, I made no attempt to hide my utter delight. I looked out at the massive park and couldn't believe it was mine. Every track, every car, every turnstile, every bolt from the front gate to the sprawling parking lot behind, it was all ours. I wished I could go back and tell the 12-year-old me, standing in line for 2 hours to ride Mayhem Mountain. Someday, you're going to own this place. And as we reached the top and the coaster plunged down the first drop, I realized I had truly gone back in time. At least I was screaming like a 12-year-old, as was everyone behind me. We plunged down the first test hill, then tilted sharply and climbed the second hill. We dropped from there into the vertical loop, tilted around the gift shops, went up a bit, then down a small hill into the corkscrew. As we returned to the loading area, everyone was screaming and cheering. Chloe didn't need to ask. She just grinned and sent us on our way again. We rode 2 more times before getting off. Kyan went to check the control panel. While the rest of us teased my sister, "You sure you don't want to ride, Chloe? It's awesome." "No, I'm good," she laughed. "I don't mind being the ride operator." "Come on, Chloe, just once, just one time, and we'll leave you alone," Tyler urged. No way, not interested. I'll ride any other ride." "Hey, what's Track B, guys?" Kyan asked. "Track B? What do you mean?" Brandon walked to the control panel and frowned. "That's strange. Maybe it's just the track that takes the cars to the storage area," Scott said and shrugged. "No," Kyan said. "It's called Track B, it's different." "Yeah," I said. "I've ridden this ride enough to know there's no other track." "Right." "Yes," Tyler agreed. He'd ridden it a lot too. "So, shall we try it?" Brandon mused. "Don't be crazy," Chloe said. "If you don't know what Track B is, it means the contractors don't know either, which means it hasn't been inspected in at least 20 years. That's suicide." "Hey," Kyan said. "If Track B existed, even the worst engineer would have found it during inspection." And Rick confirmed this entire ride. Brandon nodded. "Maybe it's just a reverse ride. It's fine, we'll ride." Scott announced from the other side of the track, though Danny looked less than thrilled. "Mark," Tyler asked. "Yeah, I guess I'll ride. What's the worst that could happen? Get taken to the repair area." "All right, then I'm in too," Tyler said hesitantly. Kyan shrugged. "Let's go." He flipped the switch to Track B, and immediately a grinding metal sound echoed from the structure. The sound lasted for almost a minute. I watched the familiar silver coaster under the pink sunset sky, but saw no change. I looked at Brandon, and he shrugged, indicating he saw nothing either. "Going?" Scott asked, pointing to the cars that had just come down. I looked at Chloe with a questioning gaze, but she shook her head firmly, so it was just the 6 of us. The 2 captains indeed must lead the ship. Tyler gave a mock military salute. "Aye, captains, my captains." I laughed and jumped into the right side of the front row. Brandon climbed in next to me. Tyler and Kyan got in behind us, and Scott and Danny sat in the very back. We pulled down the shoulder restraints, and they locked into place. "Are you sure, guys?" Chloe asked when everyone was seated. Jenny said something from her seat in the back, but I only heard Brandon yell, "Pull." The brakes released, and the car rolled off the platform and into the unknown. Lights had come on along the track while we were arguing, and the coaster looked magnificent. I was filled with awe and reverence for what this place truly meant to me and my friends. It was a symbol of youth, innocence, and carefree joy. It was our own little bubble of happiness. The coaster climbed the hill again, and from the top, Brandon and I observed the track. But in those few seconds, I saw no difference. Brandon looked over, and I shook my head in disappointment. When we reached the vertical loop, it was clear there was no Track B, but it was hard to be sad when I was still on Mayhem Mountain and still couldn't help but smile. We tilted around the now-lit gift shops, went up a small test hill, then plunged into the corkscrew. Except the corkscrew was suddenly above us. We had missed it. Instead, the track now plunged into a large square hole in the ground behind the gift shops, and we were hurtling straight into it. I was too shocked to scream or move. The black hole swallowed us instantly, and we plunged into complete darkness. I felt the comforting pressure leave my shoulders and realized the shoulder restraint had released. I gripped the front edge of the seat and heard my friends' terrified screams behind me as the coaster suddenly twisted into what felt like a corkscrew. I was too scared to do anything but cling on, although part of my brain realized the G-force of the corkscrew would probably be enough to hold me in my seat if I let go. Perhaps we exited the corkscrew and dropped hard. As the coaster dropped, the room suddenly lit up around us, and I saw the track below curving into a gentle test hill. As we hit the bottom of the hill, the shoulder restraints automatically lowered. The car went over a small test hill, then braked to begin climbing another tall hill. I took my first breath since falling underground and looked around, trying to ignore Danny's and Tyler's screams behind me. We were in a gigantic, cavernous room, and I guessed it stretched all the way to the end of the park above. There were so many vertical loops, tall drops, and sharp turns that the track was perpendicular to the ground. Throughout the gigantic underground building, black spotlights were spaced every 30 feet. They cast a dreary yellow light as far as the eye could see, but many bulbs were out, and in some places the track disappeared into the darkness. But in the open yellow light, I saw something that horrified me more than death. Far in the dimly lit section of the track, I saw the crest of a hill near the ceiling of the enormous room, and then the track ended. Suddenly, I felt the terrible reality of the outside world, my mind beginning to creep in. Jenny was screaming uncontrollably. Tyler was crying, even sobbing. Kyan was yelling at Brandon, who was looking directly at me, hitting my leg hard and repeating my name. As the car continued to climb, I finally paid attention to him. I didn't want to be alone in my fear anymore. What the hell was all I could think of? We have to get off this ride. We have to get off this ride, Mark. I know, we're going to die, I know, I yelled as we reached the top of the hill and plunged down the other side. I squeezed my eyes shut until I felt the shoulder restraint release again, and I gasped as I saw the track ahead curving into a vertical loop. I reached up, trying to pull the shoulder restraint down, but it was locked. Clinging tight, clinging to the seat, I screamed as loud as I could. As we neared the loop, I felt the brakes engage, slowing the car, and a cable pulled us from the ceiling. We were being pulled up through the loop, but too slowly for gravity to keep us in our seats. As the car began to invert, I felt my feet leave the floor of the car, my hair fell down to cover my face, and my butt lifted from the seat. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the terrified screams from behind. I focused on clinging desperately to the edge of the seat as we went around the track. We were upside down forever. It seemed like an eternity. Finally, the pressure began to ease, my butt dropped back into the seat, and my feet landed on the floor. The ringing in my ears faded, and I heard Kyan's voice. Tyler, damn it, he fell. He fell. He's dead. He hit the track down there. Brandon yelled at me, his eyes wide with madness. I was finally seeing the young Brandon. The shoulder restraint lowered again, this time tighter. We came out of the loop and sped up and down a few test hills. I tried to observe the track ahead as we passed through the safer sections. I thought I saw water reflecting on the metal track somewhere in the distance. Brandon was sobbing in his seat. Mark, what do we do? I don't want to die. I don't want to die like this. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I'm scared too, I replied. We tilted around a corner of the room, and the shoulder restraint released again. This time we plunged into a curve that tilted the car to the left, parallel to the ground, and it was a long drop. I gripped the edge of the seat as before, but this time I kept my eyes open and managed to catch Brandon as he started to slide out of his seat. As the car straightened, I didn't know who else we had lost. Most of the screaming behind us had turned to sobbing or silence. The shoulder restraint didn't lock back into place, and I felt the brakes slow the car. I didn't need to look to know what was coming. It was another inversion. This one was high and large, and I knew we would be upside down longer. Someone in the back started screaming again. It sounded like Danny. As I tried to breathe steadily and reposition my aching hands under the edge of the seat, Brandon did the same and looked over at me, tears streaming down his face as the car began to climb the loop. I don't want to die here. I shook my head, unable to think of anything to say. I felt tears leave my eyes as we reached the inversion point of the loop, and